Hey, Joyful Journeyer. Anita Adams here, your host, and welcome to the show. Today, I'm going to read from my book, Whispers of the Soul. We're going to take a look at chapter 23. Here we go. Chapter 23, Echoes Within, Distinguishing the Inner Critic from Inner Wisdom. Now, in case, just to give you a little insight, so every chapter that I share from my book starts with a little story, and this first story it's a tiny story actually, but it's one about a client that came to Bowen Island where I was running some retreats, and we had a conversation about inner wisdom versus the inner critic. And so I'm gonna share that with you, and then we're gonna go into some of the teachings from chapter 23, and we'll leave it at that. All right. So let's do this. Whispers of the Soul, chapters 23, Echoes Within, Distinguishing the Inner Critic from Inner Wisdom. I don't believe that for 1 minute, says Victoria, one of my retreat guests, as we are making our way to visit Opa, a 1,000-year-old Douglas fir in the middle of Bowen Island. I had just shared that the way to find your true path to your highest self is by asking that all important question: what do I really want? Victoria has a lot of resistance to that idea. All of our wants and desires are driven by ego, she says. And the ego is just out for itself. I want to know what I should do, not what my ego wants me to do. So you feel that if you act on your wants and desires, it's an act of selflessness? Of course it is, she responds. And it's not serving the greatest good. I want to be someone who makes a difference in the world. And asking myself what I want is not going to help me become that person. There is so much gold to be found in this inner conflict that Victoria shared with me. Maybe, maybe you have the same concerns. So let's unpack this a bit. First, understand that when you turn inward and start asking yourself, what do I really want? Part of the turning inward process is feeling the answers and how they resonate in your body. Although these feelings can be confusing, they are also telling, so pay attention. The voice of your ego, much like your inner critic, which is often guided by your ego, typically comes from a place of fear. Because it is fear based, it will give you direction that is mostly about protecting you from getting hurt or becoming uncomfortable. This is not a bad thing. But steering clear of being uncomfortable may also prevent you from stepping into the best version of who you really are. That avoidance may also cause you to make choices that don't truly serve you. For the purpose of this, I use the phrase the ego to mean that part of you that has defined your self identity. Often the ego has a death grip on that identity. In other words, it doesn't like change. The ego's main objective is to keep you safe, secure, and comfortable within the parameters of that self defined identity, which may also include keeping you on track by following society's rules. While rules serve a purpose and our identities give us a sense of belonging, they can also be very limiting. It's important you are aware of your culturescape and how the rules of that culturescape may be shaping your choices. Now, unlike your ego that comes from a place of fear, your higher self always comes from a place of love, and it knows no limits. Your higher self will only speak to you of the best version of who you really are and will lead you to the greatest potential for your life. This too can spark some fear in the mind or ego because the more you lean into listening to inner wisdom, the bigger the vision presented will grow. After all, it's leading you to the grandest version of who you are, and likely that will be outside of your comfort zone. What's yours to do is to recognize the difference between the voice that comes from fear versus the one that speaks from love and presents such a grand vision of who you are that it evokes fear. That fear is typically fear of not being enough. smart enough, capable enough, talented enough, whatever enough. And it triggers the ego to steer you away from the higher self direction. Remember, the ego wants to keep you safe and securely planted in your comfort zone. It is difficult to distinguish between these two types of fear because no matter the origin, fear feels like fear. Yet, noticing the difference is a skill you can learn. Start by asking yourself probing questions that will guide you to understanding yourself better. This is why we keep coming back to asking, who am I? What do I really want? Give yourself time and space to feel your way through the answers to these questions. When you find the clarity, which you will if you look inward and truly listen, not only is it easier to distinguish between the ego and your higher self, it also becomes much easier to act on the guidance that is offered. The way you talk to yourself and the language you use can help you decipher between the direction given by the ego and your higher self. Anything attached to I should is often coming from the ego. I should is a judgment statement. And if you pull back the layers and ask why you should do something, you'll likely discover the answer is fear based. Whenever you hear the word should crop up in your inner dialogue, question it. Should gives us such a clear indication that we need to poke around internally a bit more to better understand what is going on for us. Paying attention to the language you are using is the key. Of course, I'm not talking about the little day to day things that we tell ourselves we should do, like I should do the laundry, I should feed the kids, I should take a shower. I'm talking about when you're making those life path decisions and exploring the next steps to take. When the shoulds and should not start cropping up in these contexts, it's time to take a closer look. Get clear about the feelings that are evoking the judgment. Let's now address the notion of selfishness that my client also brought up. When you learn to decipher between ego and your voice of inner wisdom and choose to listen to inner wisdom, you are tuning into higher consciousness. Your higher self is connecting to the fabric of the universe. You could say the voice of your higher self is God's amplifier. We are part of the universe, and the universe is part of us. Another way of saying this is that we are part of God, as God is part of us, and that we are all part of something much bigger. This is my interpretation of what the poet Rumi was suggesting when he said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." When we tune into our soul voice, we are hearing the voice of God or source or the messages from the universe. It's how we connect and tune into the greater good. So when you ask yourself, what do I really want? And tune into that higher self and listen to your soul voice, you will be directed to act in your highest good and therefore the highest good for all. You can only be acting for the highest good for all when you act from your highest self. In order to act for the highest good, you must first learn to tap into and listen to your inner wisdom. By allowing yourself to discover, uncover, and understand your wants and desires, you will be guided to your higher self. To say it one more time, to make sure this really sinks in, on this joyful journey to your best life, your deepest wants and desires ultimately lead you to your highest good and the greatest good for all. You may have trouble believing this because, like my client, you feel it is selfish to go after what you want. It is not selfishness when you've learned to decipher between ego desires and what your higher self wants, the latter of which is directed by inner wisdom. Here's another tip that will help you decipher between these two voices so you can act from your highest self and the greatest good for all. Get clear on why you want something. This question really is, why does it matter? And this is another piece of wisdom I gleaned from my business coach. What's super interesting about seeking this kind of clarity is that in the process of getting clear about why something matters to you, you can actually shift an ego want to a higher self want. What you desire can be the same. It may just be a new or different understanding of why it's important. Many people talk about wanting to be 6 or 7 figure earners. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that desire. What's important, though, is having clarity about why you want to make that kind of money. Is it about status? Is your self worth attached to the number of zeros in your bank account? Is it because you want freedom? Freedom's an interesting answer, and it's one a lot of people would give. Is it freedom from something such as debt, or freedom to do something like travel, or both? These are really good questions to ask and to continue to explore further. By further exploring this desire, you may uncover what you really want is to buy a big, beautiful home. That's awesome too. Now go deeper and ask, why is that important to you? You might come to realize that what you really want is a beautiful space where you can bring your family and friends together. You discover what you are seeking is community and connection and a hub to share your love with others. Perhaps the big, beautiful house simply represents a place of love and comfort, and you want to be able to provide that for those you love. That's wonderful. And it's a higher self desire because the desire comes from a place of love rather than from a place of fear or scarcity. Having this clarity will then help you identify other opportunities to experience what you really want. Your true highest self desire can be manifested in many ways, including and beyond being a 6 or 7 figure earner and owning a big, beautiful home. For instance, it could show up in your life as a simple camping trip with your family. Some of my most precious memories that bring me the greatest joy and that deep sense of love and connection have been on such adventures. When you are not clear on the root of your desire and just focus on achieving that one outcome, such as making loads of money or acquiring that dream home, you may miss other opportunities to simply be the love you want to give. In essence, because you are trying to get something you perceive you don't have, you develop tunnel vision. When you invest your time to more deeply understand why you want something, you will either discover it is a higher self want based in love or recognize that it is an unhealthy ego desire based in fear. In the latter case, you can then do the inner work needed to address the wounding that caused the unhealthy desire and change what is driving you. You could even change that ego want into a higher self want and lean into it with more purpose. You might discover a multitude of ways to manifest your desires. Either way, you are on a path to your highest self. Those ego wants are part of your divinely guided path to your highest self. Your job is to recognize them for what they are and then do the necessary inner work to level up. In my case, once I recognized my need for validation had become a driving force in growing my business and hurting my primary relationship, it led me to do the inner work I needed to do to grow into a better version of myself. I share more about that story in an earlier chapter that I went through in the early days of an earlier business that I was building. As painful as those years were while my husband and I were doing that inner work, today I'm deeply grateful for that entire experience. I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, and yet that pain played a crucial role in my personal evolution as a human being. Your wants and desires, your dreams and your hopes are how God, Source, or the universe speak to you. Your job is to understand those wants and desires by asking probing questions. By examining the answers, you decipher if they come from a place of love for self and others, or if they come from a place of fear or lack. If they come from a place of love for self and others, then you can be assured you are moving in the direction that is for the greatest good. If they come from a place of fear or feelings of lack, then recognize this is a sign from God that it's time to invest more time looking inward and asking, who do I want to be? What do I really want? And why does it matter? And then, of course, you must listen to the answers that bubble up without judgment. Are you getting the sense that you must keep coming back to these questions again and again? Good. Because this inward asking and listening never stops. It does get easier though. And as you get better at listening and allowing yourself to be guided by your inner wisdom, the quicker you will manifest what you really want for your life. When you determine your wants come from a place of fear, it may signal that you need to love yourself more deeply. When you love yourself deeply, all your wants and desires will be rooted in that secure foundation of love. Love and fear are both forms of energy that vibrate at different speeds. Love is a high level frequency, and fear is a low level frequency. When you operate from a place of love, even with just your thoughts, you are vibrating energy at a very high level. This vibrational frequency not only makes you feel lighter, happier, and more at ease, it will also attract high vibrational energy to you and spread out in ripples around you. When you operate from a place of love, you are emitting and attracting a high form of energy that positively impacts the world around you. Consequently, you are operating for the greatest and highest good of all. Thank you for tuning in and listening to this episode today in chapter 23 of Whispers of the Soul. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you haven't got your copy of the book yet and want to, I will leave the link in the show notes below. And of course, you can also just pop over to Amazon, type in Whispers of the Soul, a guide to clarity, confidence, and joy, and you'll find me. So, yeah, thanks again for tuning in. And yeah, reach out if you got any questions or comments. I love hearing from you. And we'll catch you next time. Bye for now.